Have you ever done something for someone, a kind gesture, a simple act of compassion, without expecting anything in return? Something so small to you but to the other person, it meant the entire world? Welcome to Dream Tale, the home of stories that inspire, move, and remind us that humanity still exists in its purest form. If you're new here, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe because we bring you heart-touching stories that stay with you long after the video ends. And if you believe in the power of kindness, let us know by hitting that thumbs up. Are you ready for a story that just might restore your faith in people? Today's story isn't about money, fame, or power. It's about something much bigger. It's about a woman who had very little but gave more than most. A black waitress working long shifts in a dusty roadside diner, who noticed two hungry children walk through her door. She had nothing to gain. She didn't even know their names. But in that moment she made a decision, to feed them. To treat them like human beings. To show them love. She thought that was the end of it. A forgotten act of kindness in a long, exhausting life. But life doesn't forget. And neither do the ones who were touched by her warmth. 15 years later, just as her tired feet dragged her up the steps of her aging apartment, a sleek luxury car appeared outside her home. And what happened next? Let's just say the past came back, but in the most unexpected, powerful way. This story matters because it speaks to something we all hope is true, that goodness isn't wasted. That love, when given freely, returns in ways we never imagined. That someone out there remembers what we did, even when we don't. We live in a world where people scroll past suffering, where kindness often feels like an afterthought. But Maya, yes, that's her name, chose to stop. She chose to care. And her story is proof that even when the world turns a blind eye, compassion creates ripples. Ripples that grow, spread, and eventually come full circle. Throughout this video you'll walk with Maya through her tired days and lonely nights. You'll meet the two little faces that changed her life without knowing it. You'll see the moment her small act of love returns as a tidal wave of gratitude. So sit back. Listen closely. Let yourself feel it all, the pain, the hope, the redemption. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a reminder that the smallest acts are sometimes the biggest miracles. This is the tale of Maya. And how two orphans she once fed changed her life, 15 years later. Maya Johnson had lived in the same tiny apartment for over 20 years. Tucked behind a crumbling laundromat on the outskirts of town, the building groaned in the wind and creaked with every step she took. Paint peeled off the walls, the heater rattled louder than it warmed, and the kitchen faucet never quite stopped dripping. Still it was home. Humble. Quiet. Hers. Every morning Maya woke up before the sun. Not because she wanted to, but because that's what rent demanded. At 59, her knees cracked with every movement, and arthritis had started whispering through her fingers. But she didn't complain. She'd lived through worse. Growing up in the South with very little meant you learned early how to make something out of nothing. Her grandmother used to say, "We didn't have gold, baby, but we had grit." And Maya had plenty of that. She worked as a waitress at a local diner called Sonny's Grill, a place that hadn't seen a renovation in decades. It was the kind of place that smelled like grease, old vinyl, and burnt coffee, but it also smelled like memories. Regulars came for the food but stayed for the stories, the gossip, and Maya's warm smile. She greeted everyone the same whether they wore a suit or stained overalls. Maya wasn't paid much, minimum wage and the occasional tips, but she made it work. Her rent was always a week late, her shoes had holes on the inside, and her grocery bags were filled with more canned goods than fresh. But she never let anyone see the worry behind her eyes. She was proud, quiet, resilient, and she believed in something most people had forgotten. Kindness. She didn't have a family of her own. Never married. No children. Life had offered those moments once, long ago, but she had chosen differently, sacrificing her own dreams to take care of her sick mother and raise her younger cousins when their parents disappeared. By the time she looked up, her youth had passed her by. But Maya never felt bitter. She believed every person she had cared for had made her life meaningful in their own way. Her kindness wasn't loud. It wasn't about grand gestures or headlines. It was in the way she poured extra syrup on a child's pancake when they looked like they needed cheering up. Or how she slipped $1 into the cup of the old man who always sat outside the bus stop. Or how she'd wrap up leftover cornbread and tuck it into a napkin for the homeless woman who sometimes wandered in just to sit near the warmth. She never kept track. She never expected anything in return. One of her habits was feeding people. Even if it meant she'd have to skip dinner later that night. She knew what it felt like to go to bed hungry, and she swore she'd never turn away someone who needed food. The other waitresses often shook their heads at her. "You're too soft, Maya," they'd say. One day someone's gonna take advantage of that big heart of yours. But Maya would just smile and reply, if giving someone a warm meal is wrong, I don't want to be right. She'd laugh, but deep down she knew the cost. Her manager, Mr. Crawford, wasn't exactly the forgiving type. He'd warned her more than once not to hand out charity like it's free. But even that didn't stop her. Each day bled into the next. Mornings were slow, evenings were long. Tips varied. Her feet ached constantly. Sometimes she'd sit in her bathtub late at night, soaking in silence, whispering small prayers into the steam. She didn't want much. Just enough to get by. But even in her quiet, worn-out world, Maya still carried hope. She believed in good people. In second chances. In the idea that someday, maybe, someone would remember the kindness she offered and do something kind in return. Not to her but to someone else. She didn't know that day would come. She didn't know it would arrive in the form of 2 children, alone, dirty, scared, walking into her diner with nothing but empty stomachs and hopeful eyes. And she certainly didn't know that a single meal she would serve that day would echo back 15 years later, parked right outside her home in the form of something she never dreamed of owning. But that day was coming. And when it did, the world would finally notice Maya. Not because she asked for recognition, but because the seeds of love she planted even in poverty had finally bloomed. Let's begin. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, gray, heavy, and the kind of quiet that wrapped around the diner like a wet blanket. The bell above the door hadn't chimed in over an hour, and Maya was wiping down the same table for the 3rd time just to keep herself busy. The coffee in the pot had gone bitter, and even the cook in the back had turned down the griddle for lack of orders. Then it happened. The door creaked open and a gust of wet wind blew in. 2 children stepped inside, no older than 10, maybe younger. A boy and a girl. Soaking wet from head to toe. Their clothes were thin, the kind you'd expect to see in summer, not during a cold rainstorm. The boy held the girl's hand tightly, his eyes scanning the room with caution, not curiosity. The little girl clung to his arm, her lip trembling, her shoes squishing with every step. They didn't speak. They didn't sit. They just stood by the door, unsure if they had made a mistake. Maya noticed them instantly. She didn't see 2 burdens. She didn't see 2 strangers. She saw 2 children. Lost, hungry, frightened. She walked over with the gentlest smile. Hey there, babies. You all right? The boy straightened his back as if trying to seem older than he was. We're fine, ma'am. But his voice cracked. And Maya saw through it. You sure? She asked kindly. Because y'all look like you could use something warm. He hesitated and the girl tugged at his sleeve. She whispered something into his ear, and for the first time, Maya saw tears forming in her eyes. We don't have money, the boy said finally. We just wanted to be somewhere dry. Maya didn't flinch. Well, she said, folding her arms playfully, lucky for you, dry seats are free around here. And today, so are pancakes. Their eyes widened. Come sit, Maya gestured, leading them to a booth by the window. Ain't no sense in being cold and hungry. The boy tried to protest again, but Maya was already in motion. She grabbed 2 mugs and poured hot chocolate, extra marshmallows. Then she told the cook to get a plate of warm pancakes going. She even threw in a side of scrambled eggs and toast. Within minutes, the booth transformed from a space of silence to one filled with the smell of comfort and the quiet sounds of relief. The girl took a cautious bite. Her eyes lit up. The boy, still trying to act tough, gave in after a few bites. Soon they were both eating like they hadn't in days. Maya sat nearby, watching them from behind the counter. She didn't ask questions. Not yet. She knew what it meant to be broken, to feel like the world had forgotten you. Sometimes silence was safer than stories. But she noticed things. The boy's shoes were worn down to the sole. The girl had a bruise on her arm, small but noticeable. Their hair hadn't seen a brush in days. And their eyes, those eyes, carried something far too heavy for children their age. After they ate, Maya brought over 2 more biscuits wrapped in napkins. For later, she said. In case you get hungry again. The boy looked at her with something that resembled disbelief. Why are you helping us? Maya smiled, brushing a strand of gray hair from her forehead. Because someone once helped me. That's how it works, sweetheart. We pass it on. He didn't know what to say. The little girl stood on the booth seat and wrapped her arms around Maya's waist. Thank you, she whispered. Maya held her gently. You're safe now. They stayed for an hour, maybe 2. The rain eventually stopped, and with heavy hearts, the children said goodbye. Maya tried to ask where they were going, but the boy avoided the question. All he said was, "We'll be okay." She watched them disappear down the street, their small figures shrinking into the distance. That was the last time she saw them. No names. No history. Just two hungry souls who needed kindness for one afternoon. Maya never told anyone. She didn't write it down. She didn't expect anything to come of it. But she never forgot them. And while she thought they had vanished like a dream, those two children would never forget her either. 15 years later they would find their way back. And this time they would have more than empty hands. The years rolled by slowly like syrup on a cold plate. Days at the diner turned into weeks, then months, then years. Life didn't change much for Maya Johnson, it simply aged with her. Her back began to ache more. Her hands, once nimble with trays and coffee pots, had started to stiffen with arthritis. The neighborhood around the diner grew rougher, louder. Fewer regulars came in, and those who did were older, more tired, less talkative. Even the sun seemed to rise a little duller each morning. Maya never complained. Not once. But in the quiet corners of her mind she sometimes wondered, had her kindness ever really made a difference? Had her sacrifices mattered? She remembered those children. Not a day went by when she didn't. In the moments between orders, when the coffee was brewing and the griddle hissed with bacon, her mind would drift. She would see the boys' guarded eyes. The girls' hesitant smile. The way their shoulders had relaxed after a warm meal. And then, just like that, the memory would vanish again, like a ghost passing through a familiar room. She never knew their names. Never found out what happened to them. She had asked around a little, even stopped by the local shelter once or twice. But no one seemed to know anything. No missing child reports, no follow-up visits. It was as if they had been carried off by the storm that brought them. Sometimes she imagined that maybe they had found a safe place. A warm home. Maybe some kind-hearted family had taken them in, given them what she couldn't. That hope kept her going on the hardest days. Other times, though, a darker thought would creep in. What if they didn't make it? She would shake it off. She had to. Maya knew despair was a heavy thing, and once you let it sit too long, it rooted itself deep. So instead, she chose to believe in goodness, even when the world gave her every reason not to. Her life continued in a quiet loop. Wake up. Work. Smile. Serve. Rest. Repeat. She missed birthdays. She forgot what vacation meant. She hadn't been to the movies in a decade. But every now and then, a child would come in with tired eyes and an empty stomach, and she'd serve them like royalty. People in the neighborhood came to know her as Miss Maya. Some respected her, others took her for granted. A few mocked her soft heart. But she didn't care. She had long ago stopped looking for validation from others. Kindness was never about who noticed, it was about doing it anyway. Her manager, Mr. Crawford, eventually retired. The diner changed owners, but Maya stayed. They offered her a slight raise, barely enough to cover inflation. She didn't argue. She needed the job, and the job in some strange way needed her. One night, alone in her apartment, Maya sat by the window and stared at the moon. It was full and bright, casting silver light over her tiny living room. Her dinner sat untouched, a can of beans and dry toast. She clutched a worn photograph of her mother, the only family she had left, and whispered, "Did I do enough?" She didn't expect an answer. But the silence that followed was heavy. Outside, the world was moving faster. New technology, new money, new people. But Maya's world remained still. Her kindness hadn't brought her riches or recognition. It hadn't rescued her from loneliness. All it had done was continue. Sometimes that was the hardest part, not knowing if any of it mattered. But still she woke up the next day, and the day after that, and the one after that, until one morning something strange happened. A customer came in, a young woman dressed professionally with a bright smile and expensive shoes. She sat at the counter, ordered a coffee, and stared at Maya for a long time. Not in a creepy way, but with familiarity. "Do I know you?" Maya asked. The woman smiled, shook her head slightly, and replied, "Not yet." She tipped big. $100 bill for a $5 coffee. Maya chased her outside to return it, but the woman was already gone, like a shadow. It left Maya puzzled for days. Something was shifting. Something was coming. And though she didn't know it yet, the moment she had long forgotten, the single act of kindness she offered to two children years ago, was about to return to her life in a way she never expected. A storm was building again. But this time it wouldn't bring sorrow. This time it would bring answers. It was a quiet Sunday morning when he walked in. The diner had barely opened, and the usual morning crowd hadn't arrived yet. Maya was behind the counter, humming softly as she wiped down the chrome. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, and a faint gospel song played from the tiny radio perched above the refrigerator. Then the bell above the door rang and time seemed to pause. He stood tall in the entrance. Impeccably dressed in a tailored navy blue suit, Italian leather shoes polished to a shine, and a crisp white shirt that looked far too expensive for this part of town. His presence was commanding, like someone who didn't just walk into rooms but owned them. Maya looked up, eyebrows raised slightly. He wasn't from around here. That much was obvious. But there was something familiar in his eyes. Something hauntingly familiar. He walked slowly toward the counter, scanning the room with an expression halfway between nostalgia and disbelief. When he finally sat down on the stool directly in front of Maya, he placed his phone on the counter and smiled. "Coffee, please." "Black. No sugar," he said. His voice was deep, smooth, calm but purposeful. Maya nodded and began pouring the coffee. "You sure about the sugar?" she asked playfully. "Most folks need at least a little to deal with my jokes this early in the morning." He chuckled. "I think I'll manage." There was a pause. A strange energy in the air. The kind that makes you feel like something important is about to happen, but you don't know what yet. Maya leaned forward, studying him. "You don't look like someone who just stumbled in here by accident." He tilted his head. "I didn't." She blinked. "Then, what brings you here?" He looked down at his coffee, swirled it gently, then lifted his gaze. "You helped 2 children once," he said. 15 years ago." Maya's heart skipped. The room faded for a moment, like she was slipping underwater. Her grip on the coffee pot tightened slightly. "I don't know what you mean," she said, though her voice betrayed her. Cracked. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small object, a silver locket. Gently he placed it on the counter. Maya gasped. It was the same locket the little girl had worn that day. She remembered it clearly. She had noticed it when wiping syrup off the girl's chin all those years ago. It had a tiny chip in the corner and a heart engraved on the front. She reached out slowly and touched it. "You're the boy," she whispered. "Aren't you?" He smiled, eyes shimmering with emotion. "My name's Daniel. And yes, I'm that boy." Maya sat down hard on the stool behind the counter, the weight of realization hitting her like a wave. Daniel continued softly, "After that day we walked for hours until a shelter took us in. It wasn't easy. We were moved from home to home. Some good, some terrible. But I never forgot you." Maya's lips trembled. I just fed you. That's all." "No," he said firmly. "You did more than that. You treated us like we mattered. Like we weren't invisible. You didn't judge us. You gave us hope. You gave us dignity." Tears welled up in Maya's eyes. "I always wondered what happened to you too," she whispered. "The girl, your sister?" Daniel smiled warmly. "Angela. She's doing amazing. She's a teacher now. Loves working with kids, just like how you loved us." Maya let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Daniel continued, "We grew up, worked hard. I got into college on a scholarship. Studied business. Then tech. Eventually I started a company. It grew fast. Too fast, honestly. But I never stopped looking for you." She shook her head in disbelief. "You came all the way back here after all these years?" He nodded. "I had to. I owed you that much. Actually," he added with a soft smile, "I owe you far more than that." Maya couldn't hold the tears anymore. They spilled silently down her cheeks. She had spent years wondering if that one act of kindness had mattered. And now, sitting in front of her, was living proof that it had. "I don't need anything from you," she said quietly. "I didn't do it to be repaid." "I know," Daniel replied. "But I came to repay you anyway." Maya tilted her head, puzzled. He reached into his other pocket and slid a sleek envelope across the counter. It had her name on it, in beautiful gold lettering. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a deed. To a house. A beautiful 3-bedroom home in the suburbs. Fully paid off. A new car. A retirement fund. Health coverage. Everything she had silently wished for in the darkest hours of her life. "I can't accept this," she said. "You can," he answered gently. "And you will. Because you didn't hesitate when I had nothing. Now it's my turn." Maya looked at him, overwhelmed. In that moment, something inside her that had been quiet for years, something tired, worn out, almost extinguished, flared back to life. "Hope." He took her hand. "You changed our lives," he said. "Now let us change yours." Maya stood frozen behind the counter, the deed trembling in her hands. Her eyes darted between the official-looking paper and Daniel's calm, grateful face. It didn't feel real. It couldn't be real. I don't understand," she whispered. "This house, this money, this retirement plan, Why would you do all this for me? Daniel smiled, and there was no pride in it, only quiet reverence. Because you saw me when no one else did. You gave even when you had so little yourself. I've spent my life chasing success, building a company, climbing ladders. None of it compares to what you gave me that day. Maya was shaking her head slowly, still in disbelief. But I didn't even know your name. I just gave you a meal. And you gave us dignity, Daniel said softly. You gave us warmth. You didn't ask questions. You didn't call anyone. You just treated us like human beings. You saved us. You might not have realized it then, but you changed the entire course of our lives. He paused and pulled out his phone. With a few taps, he opened an app and turned the screen to show her. There it was, Johnson Foundation, a nonprofit for at-risk youth. A full scholarship fund, shelters, job mentorship programs. We named it after you, he said, voice slightly cracking. Angela and I, we wanted your legacy to go far beyond that diner. And now it does. Maya gasped. That's my name. Yes. And that's your heart, spread across the world. For the first time in her long, tiring life, Maya was speechless. All those years she had worried that her life hadn't amounted to much. That her work was thankless. That her kindness had gone unnoticed in a world that often rewarded greed more than grace. Now, sitting in front of her was the truth. Her quiet goodness had traveled. It had grown. It had echoed into the lives of hundreds, maybe even thousands. Because one cold night she had fed 2 orphans without expecting anything in return. Daniel looked down, then added, "And we're not done." Maya blinked. "What do you mean?" He pulled out a second envelope. "This is a check," he said, "large enough for you to never work again, unless you choose to. And if you still want to serve people, we're opening a new community kitchen downtown. We'd love for you to lead it part-time on your terms. Fully paid, of course." Maya laughed, tears mixing with surprise. "You really planned all this?" "For years," he said. "We searched high and low for you. We weren't even sure you'd still be here. But something told us, you'd still be exactly where we left you." And she was. Still serving. Still giving. Still believing. That afternoon, Maya didn't finish her shift. Daniel insisted she take the day off, and handed her the keys to the black luxury car parked outside the diner. The same car that had been drawing eyes since morning. She hadn't even realized it was for her. "No way," she said. "Yes way," he laughed. "Angela insisted on picking the color. She said you'd look good in black." Maya pressed her hand to her chest, overwhelmed. As she walked outside with Daniel, the diner staff and a few curious customers followed, clapping and cheering as she was guided to the driver's side door of the car. A red bow sat on the hood. The sun gleamed against the metallic paint. It didn't look like something that belonged in her world, and yet, it was now part of her new reality. Daniel opened the door for her. She turned back to him, still uncertain. "Are you sure this isn't a mistake?" He shook his head. "You made us feel like we mattered when the world tried to erase us. There's no price I could put on that." The engine purred softly when she started the ignition. Felt like a dream. And then, as if it were all too much to handle at once, Maya did the only thing that made sense. She laughed. A full, heart-deep laugh that echoed off the diner walls. It was the first time in years she had felt light. Not because of the money. Not because of the car. But because for the first time she finally saw the ripple her small act had created. It had come full circle. Not every story has a happy ending. But some stories, some rare, miraculous stories, come back to the people who started them wrapped in gratitude and grace. Maya's story wasn't about wealth. It was about worth. And finally, after so many years of wondering, she knew hers. The story of Maya's reunion with Daniel and Angela spread faster than wildfire. By Monday morning, local newspapers were calling it a miracle at Maddie's Diner. By the end of the week, major news outlets picked it up too. The headline on one site read, "Waitress who fed orphans gets life-changing gift from one of them 15 years later." Maya didn't care about the media though. She only cared about what happened next. Just 3 months after their reunion, the ribbon was cut on the Maya Johnson Community Kitchen, a modern, vibrant space located in the heart of the neighborhood. The walls were lined with photos of smiling children, families, and community workers. In the center, behind the glass counter, stood Maya, apron on, smile wide, heart full. She still cooked, still served, still asked people how their day was going and offered extra rolls if she sensed someone was hurting. But now she wasn't doing it alone. Daniel had put together a team. Former shelter residents, local chefs who once struggled with addiction, and single mothers looking for a second chance. Angela managed the books and coordinated the educational side, offering free life skills classes every weekend. Budgeting, parenting, even computer training. This wasn't just a soup kitchen. It was a safe haven. A place where no one was judged for where they'd been, only supported for where they could go. People started coming not just for food but for connection. For healing. One young boy, no older than 9, came in with torn shoes and a bruised eye. Maya immediately recognized the fear in his gaze. It was the same look Daniel once had. She took his hand, sat him down, and made him a hot sandwich. Later that evening, she connected him to a local support worker through one of the center's partner organizations. He and his younger sister were placed in a temporary foster home that night, safe and warm for the first time in weeks. As Maya locked the kitchen that evening, she felt a deep stillness in her chest. A peace. Daniel walked up beside her, watching the last guest disappear into the cool night. "You know," he said softly, "this place is everything I imagined. But it feels bigger than I thought it would." Maya smiled. "That's because it's not just bricks and mortar. It's stories, souls, second chances." They stood there in silence for a moment, letting it all sink in. Later that week, the center hosted its first annual Kindness Gala, an event organized to raise funds and celebrate the people who kept the mission alive. Maya was the guest of honor. She arrived wearing a simple blue dress, nothing flashy, but she wore it like royalty. The crowd rose to its feet when she entered, and not a single soul sat until she was at the microphone. Her speech was short, heartfelt. "I was never rich," she began, "but I always believed kindness was free. And now I know, it's also powerful. What you give in love comes back even if it takes 15 years to knock on your door." The room erupted in applause. She ended with a line that stayed with everyone in attendance. "Never underestimate the power of a hot meal and a warm smile. You just might be saving a future CEO." That single quote ended up printed on the kitchen's walls, etched into the foundation stone at the front entrance, and shared on thousands of social media posts. But perhaps the greatest transformation didn't happen to Maya or even to the children she served. It happened to the neighborhood itself. Where there had once been silence and suspicion, there was now music and conversation. Where people once hurried past each other, there were now porch greetings and shared gardens. Business owners came together to sponsor scholarships, local landlords agreed to freeze rent for families below the poverty line, and retired teachers volunteered their afternoons to tutor struggling students. It became a ripple effect, just like Maya's kindness all those years ago. And it all started with a single, selfless act. Years had passed since Maya served that fateful plate of food to 2 scared children on a freezing night. And now, years later, she watched the world unfold with the wisdom only time can bring. Her steps were slower, her hair grayer, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. The community kitchen had become more than a place to eat, it was a movement. And its beating heart remained Maya herself. One afternoon, Maya was sitting at the long wooden table in the back of the kitchen. She just finished reading a thank you letter from a young woman who had graduated college with the help of the Johnson Foundation scholarship. The letter read, "I grew up hungry, scared, and forgotten. But because of your kindness, I now help feed others. Thank you, Miss Maya, for reminding me that I matter." Tears welled in her eyes. Daniel walked in, now a grown man in a tailored suit but still carrying that same softness he had as a boy. He handed her a cup of coffee just the way she liked it, 2 sugars, no cream. "Do you know what today is?" he asked. Maya raised an eyebrow, smirking. "Another day you'll try to spoil me?" He chuckled. "Besides that, today marks exactly 15 years since the night you gave Angela and me that meal." Maya's lips parted slightly. "You still remember the date?" "I could never forget." He pulled out a small box from his jacket and slid it across the table. Maya hesitated. "What is this?" "Something I've been saving for the right moment." She opened the box gently. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a single charm, a tiny fork and spoon crisscrossed like an emblem. Maya blinked in disbelief. Daniel smiled. "It's custom. I wanted you to have a piece of what you gave us, something you could wear proudly." She reached up to her chest and clutched it the moment it was clasped around her neck. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "I never imagined anything like this. I still remember wondering if I'd even pay rent the night I fed you too." He nodded. "And yet you gave. That's what makes it unforgettable." That evening, a special event was hosted at the center. The mayor arrived, news crews lined up outside, and nearly every local family attended. It wasn't a gala or a fundraiser. It was something more intimate, more personal. It was Maya's legacy night, a surprise event to honor her work, her life, and the future she had unknowingly built from a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. A video presentation was played, clips from volunteers, children, adults, and community leaders all speaking about how Maya changed their lives. One after another, they shared how her belief in them had helped them believe in themselves. Maya sat front row, hands over her mouth, tears silently rolling down her cheeks. Angela, now a poised and confident woman, stood at the podium. I was just a girl when I first met Maya. Scared, dirty, hungry. But she looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years, kindness without judgment. That moment gave me hope. She turned to Maya. You didn't just feed us, you lit a fire inside us. You saw us. And now the world sees you. The crowd stood in thunderous applause. Later that night, after the event had wrapped, Maya walked alone through the quiet kitchen. She touched the tables, the walls, the photos. Her life had been lived right here, in smiles, in service, in silence, and now in honor. She thought of her younger self, tired, poor, unsure if anything she did mattered. And she thought of that night. The cold wind. The 2 children. The food. The unspoken connection. A single act of humanity. It all came full circle, not with fanfare or fortune but with love, transformation, and purpose. Just as she turned to leave, she saw a young teenage girl at the door, clutching a baby. Maya didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, smiled warmly, and asked, You hungry, sweetheart? The girl nodded, her eyes misting. Maya held the door open wide. Come on in. Let's get you fed. Because for Maya, no matter how much the world changed, her mission remained the same. Kindness first. Always. As the story of Maya, Daniel, and Angela comes to a close, one thing becomes clear. It was never really about the luxury car, the cameras, or the speeches. It was about kindness. It was about one woman choosing compassion when no one else was looking. And it was about 2 children, once lost, who found a way to rise and give back to the woman who gave them everything. Maya never expected anything in return for feeding those kids that night. She never knew her small act of generosity would ripple through decades, changing not only their lives, but the lives of hundreds more. From the outside, Maya's life might have looked simple. A diner waitress scraping by, working long hours for little pay. But in reality she was building something extraordinary. A legacy rooted in love. A reputation built on sacrifice. And a name that would live forever in the hearts of those she touched. Daniel went on to expand his company's social programs, dedicating a portion of his profits to support shelters, food programs, and mentorship initiatives across the country. He often told interviewers, My first boardroom was Maya's kitchen table. Angela, with strength and grace, became a voice for young women in the foster care system. She started a nonprofit, Table of Hope, which offered scholarships and housing assistance to girls aging out of foster care. Her mission? To be for others what Maya had been for her. And Maya? She kept showing up. Every morning, she opened the kitchen with a warm hello and a fresh pot of coffee. She hugged the regulars, gave extra portions to the hungry. And when no one was watching, she still whispered quiet prayers over each meal, hoping it reached more than just the stomach, hoping it touched the soul. That's the kind of person she was. And maybe, just maybe, that's the kind of person we can all try to be. Because kindness doesn't need a spotlight. It doesn't need money or fame. It just needs a willing heart. So now, dear viewers, we turn to you. Ask yourself, what would you do if a hungry stranger knocked on your door? Would you turn them away, or would you, like Maya, offer them a warm plate and a warmer smile? You don't need to change the whole world in one day. You just need to change one moment for one person. That's how legacies are born. So let Maya's story remind us all. Every small act matters. Every bit of compassion counts. And the seeds of love you plant today might bloom into miracles 15 years from now. If this story touched your heart, if it made you smile, cry, or simply reflect, don't keep it to yourself. Backhand index pointing right, like this video. Backhand index pointing right, share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Backhand index pointing right, subscribe to Dream Tale, where every week we bring you real, powerful stories that remind you of the goodness still alive in this world. Backhand index pointing right, and leave us a comment below. Have you ever experienced an act of kindness that changed your life? We'd love to hear your story. This has been another unforgettable tale from Dream Tale, where stories live and hearts awaken. Until next time, keep believing, keep giving, and never forget, a single act of kindness can echo across generations.